Welcome to Chefatron's Top 20 of 2021. I want to show off my favorite top 20 action figures and collectibles that I've reviewed throughout 2021. Now, obviously, this top 20 is just going to be comprised of figures from the Transformers line, from G.I. Joe Classified series, from the Marvel Legends, and from the Star Wars Black Series line. Those are the lines I review. So it's not an all-encompassing top 20 for 2021 where I showcase every single figure from all the lines released in 2021. These are just my favorites out of all the figures I reviewed for this year. So with that, I wanted to start off with some honorable mentions. These two figures I thought were pretty amazing, but just didn't quite make it to the top 20 list. But nevertheless, they are still amazing figures. We have the Earthrise, or I should say Kingdom Earth Mode Sideswipe, as well as Kingdom Airraiser. Both figures got flying colors in my reviews of these two, and I absolutely think they were gems in the Kingdom line, and if you have a chance to get them, go get them. Starting off the countdown, at number 20 we have Wanda from WandaVision as the Scarlet Witch. Now, a lot of my appreciation for this figure has to do with how much I loved the show. I think that was an amazing show, the WandaVision on Disney Plus. And I think Hasbro nailed the figure for the Marvel Legends series. This is, I think, if I may be so bold as to say, the best MCU version of Wanda from the Marvel Legends line. I'm pretty sure we're going to get a better version. Maybe when Multiverse of Madness hits, maybe we'll have a wave 2 of the Marvel Legends figures for that movie, or some exclusive. I'm sure Hasbro is going to come up with a better version of this figure, but as it is, this is currently my favorite Scarlet Witch figure from the Marvel Legends line. At number 19, we have Kingdom Deluxe Class Huffer. Now, this figure I believe was a breakthrough. Hasbro is slowly bringing in all the mini-bots, the Autobots, into deluxe figure format. And oh my goodness, they had an amazing figure with the Huffer mold. Sure, it has some flaws here and there, but for me, this was a perfect figure. I've never appreciated the Huffer character in G1 and in some of the Generations figures that we've gotten from Hasbro, simply because it did not capture the essence of Huffer. This figure, on the other hand, did absolutely that. I'm so happy Hasbro gave us this figure. It just shows Huffer how he should have been in the Generations format. In at number 18, we have the comic book Darth Maul. This was a comic book inspired series of figures that Hasbro came up for the Black Series. They had that book fold cover as part of the packaging. Now, this could be an unpopular opinion, since a lot of people think this is just a repaint and a cash grab for Hasbro, but I personally love this character. I've been a big Darth Maul fan ever since he was introduced in the Phantom Menace. I think he's one of the more dynamic and iconic villains in the Star Wars mythology, and this figure, I just fell in love with this figure. I don't know why, but when I reviewed him, I thought he was the best Darth Maul figure we've ever gotten from Hasbro. Simply because they nailed the details. And that head sculpt really sold me on this figure. And if you've seen my review, I was gushing all over this figure. I couldn't be happier with a Darth Maul figure. At number 17, we have the Studio Series 86 Deluxe Class Jazz. Now, a lot of people will probably say, it's just a simple figure. Why is it part of the top 10 or the top 20? Well, you know, we've had a lot of Jazz figures for the Generations line, and none of them quite hit the mark as much as this figure has. This figure just gives us so much nostalgia. It's as accurate as we can possibly get for any Jazz figure. The cartoon accurate Jazz figure that we've ever gotten from Hasbro. And he doesn't have the wings, the color is correct, the head sculpt is correct. It's just such a welcome figure for I guess, Studio Series or the Generations line. I always treated the Studio Series 86 as a Generations line that's just been rebranded just to fit the movie line that Hasbro's trying to push out. But this was such a welcome figure. I just loved how it came out. I mean, sure, it has some issues with transformation, but to me, this has been a long-awaited Jazz figure for a lot of the Generations fans who've been collecting the Generations figures and trying to get that modern, updated G1 Transformers in their collection. In at number 16, we have the Black Series Bokeh. Oh my goodness, I loved how this figure came out. Especially how great they made that head sculpt. It's so close to the likeness of the actress who played her, and I just love the figure overall. And part of the appreciation, again, comes from watching the show, both the Clone Wars and the Mandalorian. This figure just encapsulates the character. Sure, she has some problems with the helmet. I thought it was a little too tight, which they fixed with the Cosca Reeves figure. But overall, I think the figure came out great. This is an amazing, amazing addition if you are collecting the Black Series figures from the Mandalorian and the Clone Wars. At number 15, we have the G.I. Joe Classified Series Alley Viper. Oh my goodness, one of the figures I was so excited to get this year, simply because I had this figure growing up as a kid. It was one of my favorite vintage G.I. Joe figures back in the 80s. It was such a gaudy looking figure with all the bright colors and orange and all that. But I loved it. I loved the accessories. I loved this kind of Cobra trooper that just, I thought he would kick ass. He would just beat up a bunch of Joes simply because he was a formidable part of the infantry. I love this figure. At number 14, we have the premium finish War for Cybertron trilogy Voyager class Siege Optimus Prime. Actually, he was in for all the series like Siege, Earthrise, and Kingdom from the Netflix shows because the designers didn't actually change his design. But I know this is just a repaint, and we've seen this mold several times. But I'm putting him as in the top 14 spot simply because the colors really blew me away with this figure. And this should have been how they presented the figure to begin with. I get it that they had to come up with a hybrid between the Netflix show and the G1 version of Optimus Prime when they first released this mold, but Takara Tomy did a wonderful job in creating a better, or if not the best version of the Siege mold for Optimus Prime. And as far as premium finishes goes, the premium finish line was really terrible line for me, if you ask me. I've seen pictures online and it just made the figures worse in my opinion. And this one was probably the only successful figure they've had in that line. And I'm just really loving this figure. I did not expect to appreciate this figure as much as I do now. I honestly thought this was just going to be a review and flip type of figure, but it looks to be quite the keeper. At number 13, we have the Black Series Fennec Shand. And again, I love the show. I love Mandalorian and now the Book of Boba Fett. And for the first attempt, Hasbro really nailed this figure. I love the likeness to the actress. I love the details of this figure. And it's just, again, one of those figures that is completely next to impossible to get in the wild unless you have connections, unless you pre-ordered this way back when it was announced. It is near impossible to acquire this figure on retail. It just sucks. Such a wonderful figure, but praises and kudos to the designers of this figure. I do hope Hasbro can re-release this figure maybe as part of a 2-pack. I don't know. Or just as a solid case for retailers, because fans need to get this figure on retail and not from scalpers. It is a perfect version of Fennec Shand. I do hope we get to see more of the character in the coming days, not just on the Book of Boba Fett, but as well as in other properties and other shows of Star Wars on Disney+, maybe even movies. At number 12, we have the Cobra Viper from the Classified series of Hasbro. Again, just like the Alley Viper, so much nostalgia comes with this figure. One of my favorite figures back in the 80s. my favorite Cobras was the Cobra Viper. I don't know, for some reason I just really love that figure. I brought it with me all the time, and Hasbro came up with this classified series version. It gave it a more modern look, combining the old vintage look. This just does it for me, for the Viper. I made fun of this figure because of the bandana and the goggles and all that, but kidding aside, the figure has so much details. It brings so much to the table. It is perhaps one of the best, if not the best, army building figure from the classified series line, at least for Cobras. You've got the Trooper, the Officer, you've got the Alley Viper, the Bat, but for me, this has been my favorite, and I just really, really love this figure. And rounding off the top half of our countdown, in at number 11, is the Studio Series 86 Deluxe Class. No, the Sharkticon! Oh my goodness, I've always wanted a Sharkticon figure. We've had the Legends class, small-sized Gnaw for a long time now. That would have been my go-to Sharkticon figure for the longest time. I love that figure. But when this figure came out, it just blew that other figure out of the water, pun intended. It is an amazing, amazing rendition of the Sharkticons, of Gnaw, and it combines a lot of the aesthetics of the G1 figure, and most importantly, it captures the likeness of how this character appeared on the cartoons and in that cartoon movie. Just a wonderful job overall with this Gnaw figure. Starting off our top 10, we have the Kingdom Voyager class Cyclonus. Cyclonus was one of my favorite Decepticons from that movie, and I've always wanted to get the action figure. I never got the G1 toy, so I've been collecting the Cyclonus figures ever since we got him from the classics or the Henkei line, the Generations, the Universe, I think Universe and Henkei line, then the Generations. But none of those figures compare to what we've gotten from the Kingdom line. This is the best rendition of Cyclonus, at least in the Generations line, that Hasbro and Takara have ever come up with. I'm just so pleased with this figure. I had a few complaints with this figure, but overall I thought it was the perfect Cyclonus figure. And I have him here posed with Nightstick. This Nightstick came with the Generation Selects Artfire. I thought it was best that he was with Cyclonus instead of Artfire. At number 9, we have the Marvel Legends Infinity Saga Mark III Iron Man. And this character, at least this version of Iron Man, was the one that got me started into Marvel Legends and really going hardcore in Marvel Legends and getting back into the comic books. I had collected some Marvel figures here and there casually, but to go back to collecting Marvel figures, Marvel Legends figures, this movie, Iron Man, and this particular version of his suit really started the ball rolling for me. And I went back to the comic books, I went back to Marvel Comics. I stopped for a while after high school, but it just drew me back, and I don't know what it is with this suit. I started buying the original Iron Man figures way back when. They were, well, they looked okay, but in today's standards, they were horrible. This figure, I did not expect it to look this good. When they announced this figure, I was like, why do we need another Mark III? I mean, they should just focus on the more modern armors, but Hasbro couldn't have made a better decision by giving the fans what we deserve. This is the Mark III figure that we've always wanted and what we deserve. It just gives so much justice to the armor. Those original figures were just lame in today's standards, and I was just so impressed with this figure. And if you remember my review, I thought this was the best Marvel Legends figure from the movieverse, from the MCU that Hasbro has come up with. It beat out the Mark VII. I love the Mark VII, but I think aesthetic-wise, the design of this figure, this is by far the best Iron Man Marvel Legends figure for the MCU for me. In at number 8, we have the Marvel Legends What If Zombie Captain America. And this was a surprise. This was sort of like a sleeper figure in the wave. Hasbro probably thought this was going to do well because they packed him 2 per case, but I did not actually believe it was going to be this good. I love this figure. This was probably, if I may be so bold as to say, as the best figure in that What If wave. A lot of collectors have been snubbing this figure, especially here in Manila, but I think it is the gem of the wave. It is so well made. This encapsulates all the manufacturing progress and innovation that Hasbro has come up with in designing their Marvel Legends figures. And look at the design, look at the paint apps, look at the joints, the articulation. If this is the future of Marvel Legends from Hasbro, I say bring it on. We need to see more of this kinds of figures, especially the engineering, especially how they made and how they molded all those rotten and eaten up bits of the figure. This was a stellar performance in terms of manufacturing and design. At number 7, we have the Classified Series Cobra Bat. Oh my goodness. A figure that I've always wanted to get, the 3.75-inch figures, and now we have the 6-inch figure. When I was growing up with my brothers, I never had the Cobra Bat. It was my youngest brother who had him, and he would not trade it for the life of me. He would always keep it, and we'd lose all the weapons, obviously, when we were playing with him. But I thought it was one of those figures back in the day that was well beyond its time. And to have those small accessories, those interchangeable hands, I thought Hasbro was the best action figure company or manufacturer back in the day, because they just really gave us a wonderful figure back then. And now they've brought it, a lot of nostalgia with this figure. They've brought it in a more modern look. It's got all the elements of the vintage figure and more. At number 6, we have the What If duo of Captain Carter and Steve Rogers as the Hydra Stomper. I'm putting both of them in the same spot because you gotta get them both. Obviously, you can't get one without the other. On the show, this was an amazing pair. They were an amazing combination of brawn and wit and skill. And I love the show. I love that particular episode. That has to be my favorite episode of the What If series. Sure, they're not perfect. I've seen a lot of reviews complaining about these two figures, but when you combine them both and you have them on your shelf, they are the perfect representation of these two characters. In 5th place, the top 5, we have the Studio Series 86 Leader Class Dinobots, Grimlock and Slag. Now I'm putting them both together because I think they deserve to be in the same spot. We've had several Dinobot figures in the Generations line, but none of those figures really gave us the G1 nostalgia feel and the modern look as much as these two figures have. These figures, both in scale and form, design and engineering and transformation, really encapsulates that 80s Dinobots and giving it a more modern look which fits in your Generations line. At number 4, we have the secret Sith apprentice and assassin, Asajj Ventress from the Black Series line. I always wanted a Black Series figure of this character. I've been a big fan. I collected all her 3.75-inch figures way back when in the Clone Wars, I believe, and none has come close to how well this figure has been executed. It is a long overdue figure for a lot of the fans from the Clone Wars, especially me. I've always dreamed of getting a 6-inch figure for Asajj Ventress. It's just a shame that this figure and the wave is pretty hard to come by nowadays, especially here in Asia. I was just lucky to find one being sold at a hobby shop, and all my pre-orders got canceled. So yeah, it was a bummer. It was a pain trying to get this figure, but I am happy to actually get her. In 3rd place, we have the Marvel Legends, at least Gameverse, Miles Morales Spider-Man from the Marvel Legends No Way Home Armadillo Build-A-Figure wave. Easily the best figure in the wave, the best Miles Morales Marvel Legends figure we've ever gotten from Hasbro. I just love this figure. I love how it came out. And this figure shows how far the manufacturing of Hasbro has come in terms of making these Marvel Legends figures. You got lots of amazing engineering on this figure with those pinless joints. You got great tampos, great aesthetic, great paint apps, articulation, design, everything crafted into a would-be masterpiece figure. I love this Miles Morales figure, and I think if you're a big fan of the character, this is a figure you do not want to miss out on. There've been other Miles Morales figures, but nothing has come close to how well and how good and how awesome this figure is. And at number 2, for second place, we have Soundwave. We have the Core Class Kingdom Soundwave. We have the Voyager Class Studio Series Soundwave from the Bumblebee movie. And again, from the Bumblebee movie, we have the Studio Series Core Class Ravage. All 3 figures deserve to be in the second spot, in my opinion. If you're a big Soundwave fan, you've got to pick up all 3 of these figures. Starting off with the Core Class figure. It was just great to finally have a boombox Soundwave. And in that scale, he would fit nicely in alt mode for the Generations line. I mean, if you're a big Transformers fan, even in the 80s, you've got to get that figure. Now, speaking of nostalgia and being a fan of Transformers in the 80s, he wanted a more modern look of Soundwave, not the Michael Bay universe type of Soundwave. There's no other figure to get but the Travis Knight universe Transformers Bumblebee movie Soundwave. Sure, the alt mode was hideous at best, but it grew on me. The robot mode was fantastic, especially if you've got Ravage to pair with that figure. This is by far the best movie figure we've gotten from the entire Studio Series line. That's just my opinion, but I'm sure a lot of people will agree. I mean, we've had a lot of movie figures, but at least in the robot mode, this guy takes the cake. This is the best movie figure for me, and it got me back into collecting movie figures, at least the Travis Knight movie figures. And at number 1, the top spot goes to the Kingdom Leader Class Galvatron. Oh my goodness, this is an amazing figure. We've had several attempts from Hasbro and Takara Tomy to give us Galvatron for the Generations line, Universe line, Headgay line, and none of them comes close to how well this figure gives us that G1 cartoon accurate Galvatron. I mean, it combines a lot of the aesthetics of the movie Galvatron, the cartoon Galvatron, and at the same time giving us some of the designs and aesthetics of the G1 toy. I love this figure. It had its problems, particularly with that shoulder assembly, that misassembled shoulders. Oh, I'm sorry, I don't think I'm allowed to say that anymore. Hasbro is calling it their variant assembly. I mean, but seriously, it was an error in manufacturing, and I kind of wish Hasbro would own up to it and just replace every single misassembled Galvatron that they put out. But, you know, that's what it is. It is what it is. And if you are lucky enough to find one that's been properly assembled, or you've been lucky enough to fix the misassembled version, this figure is an amazing figure. It came out so great. Transformation, engineering, aesthetics. I'm happy to give it the top spot of best figure that I reviewed for 2021. So there you have it, folks. That has been Chefatron's top 20 for 2021. Let me know in the comment section what you thought of my top 20 list. Hit that notification bell so you never miss out on any of my latest video reviews. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe. And at this point in time, I wanted to wish everybody, everywhere in the world, if you're watching this video, have a happy, safe, and blessed, prosperous new year. For those of you here in Manila, in the Philippines, who are watching, nais ko lang batiin kayo ng isang maligaya at manigong mapagpalang bagong taon. Thanks for watching.